Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are talking about the downfall of Mike Norvell at Florida State, and I am joined by TJ Pittinger, who is the host of the Double Fries No Slaw at Florida State podcast. And TJ, earlier this year, we've seen several firings in college football. UCLA decided to make a decision early, Virginia Tech, LSU, Florida, Arkansas, but Florida State decides to go in a different direction. They say, hey, we are going to wait and evaluate Mike Norvell at the end of the season. Why are they having a different approach to handling Mike Norvell's job security than a lot of these other big-time programs?
I don't have a great answer for you. I can speculate on it about a million different ways, but that is the $1 million question that this fan base has and the people that cover this program have. I think there are multiple things. If I've got to speculate here, I think that the buyout being what it is and Florida State's financial problems, they're not poor or broke, but they did just do between a football only facility that cost nearly $500 million and a couple $100 million in stadium renovations and playing in the ACC, where they obviously just sued the conference because they don't feel like they're being compensated fairly based on their viewership. This delta that exists, or this gap that exists with the ACC's powers and then, the SEC's power, well, really just all the SEC teams and Big Ten teams, they're at a financial disadvantage just in general. And then they've got, a lot of stuff going on. And then there's also this mix of like, well, who can you go get? Like if you're going to spend $50+ million on a buyout, Norvell, if he was to get let go, is not going to be in a James Franklin situation where he's still a highly sought after coach at the Power 4 level. And so Penn State made a decision kind of knowing that, it's a risk if he doesn't get another great job, but somebody's probably going to pay him close to that $8 million that he was making at Penn State, or that he was owed at Penn State. I mean, Norvell's not going to demand that on the open market. I think he's a good coach. I think that he can make it work somewhere else where the job is maybe not so big. But I mean, Norvell's price tag is probably going to be around $3 to $5 million, like max, if he goes down to the group of five, or maybe takes a low level Power 4 job. I don't know that he could garner any interest from low level Power 4 programs or not, but yeah, I think that. So there's that factor of, the finances, the who can you go get is certainly a factor, right? Are you confident that you can land a big time coach if you're having to pay this buyout and buy out these assistants? When you committed to Gus Malzahn and Tony White, they were 3-year deals. And so can you, it's an estimated ton of money to fire this staff and go get a new one. And then I think there is probably a small faction of the administration that is giving him credit for rebounding some this year. Now, I have thoughts and opinions on that you don't get credit for digging yourself into a hole and then climbing back out of the hole halfway, like that. Yeah, you are making progress to get out of the hole, but it's still Florida State and you shouldn't be in a hole to begin with. Certainly not a 2-10 size hole. So I think there's probably some faction of the administration that says, hey, he's improving this year. The offense is better. Like, let's see how these coordinator hires work in year 2 and 3. And then, so I think it's all those things at once. They saw him win 19 games in a row. They saw him go 13-0. They saw him have a 10-win season. And so when you combine all those things, I think ultimately, I don't think that's why they're ultimately not making a decision yet. I think that if they could kick the can down the road one more year, because he gets to 7 wins and then maybe 8 with a bowl game, though bowl game results, certainly shouldn't mean anything for retaining a coach. I think when you factor all that together, that's why he still has a job right now.
James Franklin, I think, is a incredibly good comparison, even going down to like the coordinators, because at Penn State, they went very big and got Anthony Kotelnicki. They got Jim Knowles from Ohio State. And then obviously Florida State, they go and get the DC from Nebraska, who was doing a great job up there. They get Gus Malzahn to come in, kind of like a Chip Kelly type of a thing that Ohio State did last year, even now what Ohio State's doing with Matt Patricia. So just kind of the fact that they went all in on it this year. And like you said, Mike Norvell has had a lot of success. He was able to take this program that was in a very bad place when he took over, 13-0, even this year, there has been a lot of highs. He beat Alabama to start off this year when no one was expecting that. And then even like the last 2 weeks, uh, absolutely demolished Wake Forest, and then you demolished Virginia Tech. Is there any little bit of these last 2 weeks, and the last two games of the year, NC State and Florida, are obviously very winnable, where he is actually starting to win back some support with the fan base and even just fundraising?
I think in a very, very measured way and with a very small subset of the fan base. And the reason for that is not to diminish winning games, because winning games is what matters in this sport. If we say, yeah, you beat Wake, you beat Virginia Tech, you go beat NC State, and you go beat Florida, before the year, I think a lot of people would have said, yeah, man, that sounds pretty good. Now, Wake, I don't think anybody was expected to be very good, but Virginia Tech could be like a sneaky ACC team. We expect NC State to be good. Florida's got a ton of talent on their roster. But then I think when you really drill down and you look at what you're saying here, are we going to how much credit are we giving for beating, like at Florida State, how much credit are we giving for beating Wake Forest? Like that should just be an auto win every single year, right? And then you look at Virginia Tech, who got dominated by Old Dominion earlier in the year and has 3 wins and fired their coach. Are you getting a lot of credit for that? You look at NC State, who just gave up 500 million points to Miami and looked like they quit it. Like, are you getting credit for that? And then you look at Florida, who's got 3 wins and no coach. So yes, you want to take care of business against bad teams, but I don't know that 4-game stretch, the Clemson game was between the Wake and the Virginia Tech one, which they weren't able to get. But I don't know that those 4 results are enough to say, oh yeah, man, this thing is heading right in the right direction. 4 wins against bad teams I don't think it moves the needle for enough of the fan base to really buy back in and believe. Now, if Virginia Tech was a sneaky ACC team that had 7 or 8 wins, and if, I don't know, NC State was playing much better than they are, and if Florida didn't have the dumpster fire of a season they did, then I do think it would be viewed differently. But you lose to, you look at their last, so I just named 4 games, plus the Clemson loss, plus the Stanford loss, which happened before that. Their last 6 games are against all teams besides Wake Forest with losing records. And they lost to Stanford, who had a losing record. They lost to Clemson, who had a losing record. And even if they win 3 of those other ones against teams with losing records, I just don't know that's enough to buy back the fan base. Now, he could certainly buy back a lot of favor if they brought him back next year and they started out hot again, beat Bama in September. Yes, you'll start to buy some favor back. But I don't know that there's much they could do to really win people back over.
Yeah, Mike Norvell takes over in 2020. We just went through Jimbo Fisher kind of leaving in smoke, Willie Taggart. That was an absolute disaster. 3 wins, 5 wins, 10 wins, and then we get 13 wins. We all know the story. Jordan Travis gets hurt late in the season. They get snubbed from the college football playoff. Who knows if they would have been in anyway, even if Jordan Travis was completely healthy. We don't have to bring any of that up today. But then just everything just fell apart the next year, where they play a very close game against a good Georgia Tech team, had to have a game-winning field goal, and then it just seems like the team died and flatlined. Like, what happened where this program went from, hey, they have they're going to be one of the top 10 or 15 best programs in the country again under Mike Norvell, to this is just a complete disaster?
Yeah, I do think the snub, I don't think we realized it as much at the time, but I think the snub there at the end of 23 really ruined all just program momentum, all belief, because Mike Norvell had preached and he was consistent in this. And Mike Norvell does a lot of good things, right? Like I don't want to treat him like he's Willie Taggart, right? Who was just objectively awful at everything from just organization to whatever. But I think
he seems like a good guy when you listen to him talk.
Yeah, I think he cares. I think he tries hard. I think he puts in good effort. I think he is pretty good at developing relationships, not a great recruiter, but I think he does a lot of things well. I think when the snub happened, it completely undid his entire message and his entire mantra of like, if you work, it's going to pay off. You're going to be, and I think that kind of broke where they were at. It also kind of changed his philosophy fundamentally. After the 23 season, they got, I mean, this happens at every program, so I don't want to single out Florida State, but there were a lot of guys that were looking to leave and looking for a change of scenery. And I think Florida State overpaid for some of those guys because they wanted to keep as much intact from that 23 season as they could to go forward. And was that the best use of resources? Was that the best way to rebuild your 24 roster? Probably not. There were some coaches that really should have been let go after that 23 season. And I think Mike's thinking was, again, we want to keep the unit together as close as we can. How do you fire people after they go 13-0? I mean, I don't know. Saban would have fired people if he didn't think they were performing up to snuff if they'd have won the national championship. But I think just their entire mentality after that 23-year changed. And I still think he tried to build things the same way. But a lot of that was through the portal. And the portal has shown us that you can have the highest of high success and you can have the lowest of lowest failures, especially if you miss on the offensive line, which they missed, and they missed at the quarterback position. And so Florida State's offense last year was a complete train wreck. They had a terrible quarterback and nobody to block for him. And you're just not going to win a lot of games like that. And they didn't. They won 2 games. And so you can't miss at key spots in the portal if that's what you're going to be overly reliant on. And they did. And, then one thing led to another. I mean, after you lose your first 3 games and one of them is Memphis, you kind of just saw the quit factor, and Florida State was lucky to get 2 wins last season.
I want to ask a question about high school recruiting too, because you would think that, you wouldn't just need to be, especially if you're Florida State, need to be constantly relying on the transfer portal and really hitting on the guys like Jordan Travis, like Jared Verse, like Keon Coleman. Like you look, that was kind of my argument too with like, hey, Dabo Swinney, you should really be hitting the transfer portal, because I looked at Clemson, who was lacking wide receivers, but Mike Norvell, it seemed like for a few years there, was just getting multiple NFL wide receivers out of the transfer portal. So what's the deal with high school recruiting, and why isn't that really, because we are in like year 5, year 6, like some of these guys, like it's not like Florida State is, they're not like top 5, top 10 classes in the country, but they're still top 25 recruiting classes.
Yeah, I think it's a few things. One is when Mike came in, it was during the COVID year. And I'm not saying that we're in a bad spot because he came in during the COVID year, but he wasn't able to have kids on campus for over a year from the time he stepped foot on Florida State's campus. And so he wasn't able to develop those relationships. He wasn't able to go out to the high schools. He wasn't able to do the kind of visits that he wanted to. And I don't know, you only get that new coach bump every so often, or I'm sorry, just once. Every time you get hired, you get that new coach excitement, that new car smell. He wasn't able to get any of that. And so he did have to basically just stick with Willie Taggart's roster and do his best there. And so he went 3-6 that year. It was the COVID year. Nobody cared about football anyway, because there were bigger things going on in the world. And then in 21, when he won 5 games, they started out terribly. They started 0-4, and they went 5-3 down the stretch. There seemed to be progress. And I think because he didn't have those early relationships, he almost by like default had to rely on the transfer portal. And I think it was a blessing and a curse, because the portal then wasn't what it is now. You were able to just go out and almost out of necessity load up there. And they did great evaluations. They did a great job pulling guys in. And nobody else, I don't say nobody else, other programs or the entire country was not yet using the portal like Florida State did at that time. And so it's just a supply and demand issue, right? If nobody else is using the portal, you can go out and get a ton of studs. Well, now everybody, maybe except for Dabo, uses the portal, and there's just not that supply. You can't go out and get 8 studs in a cycle because everybody gets 2 or 3, right? And so you can't rebuild a whole roster that way. And so I think almost out of necessity, they had to use the portal. And I think there was an assumption of, oh, we can just do this every year. We can go crush it in the portal every single year. And so that blessing from like the 21 to 23 portal cycles has almost now turned into a curse, because with Mike Norvell's situation right now, they don't have time to recruit 3 good classes and just hope that those guys develop right. And they after this year, say he comes back, say they win these next 2 games and he comes back, they're going to have to go to the portal again for 5 new offensive linemen. They're going to have to go to the portal again for a few defensive linemen. They're going to have to go to the portal again for the linebacker position and the wide receiver. So because you can't just take high schoolers and give Mike Norvell 2 or 3 years for them to develop. The other side of it, so the necessity, supply and demand thing is there. The other side of it is I think he very much believes in development and coaching. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with developing guys in your program to one day be really good. His development hasn't been good enough, right? And at the same time, you need some killer recruiters. Like, you need guys that will just walk into a living room and slam the door shut. Like, there's only one Brian Hartline in the country. I get that. But like, that kind of guy who just commands a room when he walks into it, develops relationships, and gets guys to sign on the dotted line. I understand there's only one Brian Hartline, so that's not, the thing I'm saying is, oh, you need three of those guys. But similar profiles to that. All of Mike's staff is very developmental and coaching based. And I think he really believes in, we will get guys that want to be here. We will get people in that will be really good, and we'll develop them up. And at the end of the day, man, sometimes talent just wins. You can coach them as hard as you want. You can train them as good as you want. You can have the best system and scheme and everything else. And sometimes guys are just bigger, faster, stronger than you. And there you go. You lose games because you don't have a talent edge. And so that's where I really think his struggles in recruiting have been.
I agree with you on the last part of it, where sometimes talent does just win out. But with Florida State and the talent that they have in their conference, they still should, even if they're not recruiting with, the top 10 teams in the country, they still should have more talent. And you can, with those resources, be able to develop a team that can, be winning 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 on the right year games in the in the ACC every single year. Maybe if, it wouldn't be the best when you go over to the other conference, but then when you go over to the other conference, you're probably going to get a lot more financial games whenever that comes, whatever conference that is going to be for Florida State. But I was kind of just going through the last 2 years at Florida State and like what really went wrong. I don't think Florida State's won a one-score game in the last 2 years. And it seems like the biggest thing to me of what's really just fallen apart over the last 2 years, just from a big picture perspective, outsider looking in, is consistency. And the thing that's very troubling, I'm sure, for you and other Florida State fans, is that you brought in the new coordinators this year and you went all in on those guys to bring more consistency to the team. And we've had just the same. I mean, it's been better than this year, obviously, than it was last year, but it's still just not good enough.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. Like, they have had a talent advantage in a lot of games. And I don't want to misquote this, but I'm almost positive that if you look at the 247 talent composite, right, not just the recruiting rankings, but the total team composite, I want to say that if you base it off that, which I don't want to pretend that metric is perfect or that metric is the end all be all for who should win every game, but Florida State under Mike Norvell is 22-21 when they have a talent advantage. Right. So what does that mean? When they have the deck stacked in their favor, they're 500 essentially, or a game over. That stat might be 21-21. It might be 23-21. Either way, I'm off by a game either way. That's just not good enough, man, at FSU. Like, so you're right. Like, they do have a lot more talent than a lot of these teams they're losing to. They had more talent than Stanford. They had more talent than Pitt. They had more talent than Virginia. And I'm not discrediting those teams. Sometimes you lose games when you're more talented. We've seen that with Ohio State. We've seen Georgia lose games they're more talented than. But that may happen like once or twice a year for the big time programs in this country, right? We saw Notre Dame do it last year with Northern Illinois. Sometimes the other team just gets you. But you know what Notre Dame did in every other game last year when they had more talent? They won in the playoff, in the regular season, everything. So you get a boo-boo. You get a slip-up. It's happened far too often where Florida State has gone into a game under Mike Norvell with more talent and lost the game. That is on development. That is on coaching. That is on the staff at that point. Again, you get one or two a year. That's fine. 2020 doesn't get counted against him in anyone's mind. But I do think that is a massive problem. And you're right. Florida State should never go worse than 8-4. Like 7-5 should be like what? I mean, they ran Bobby Bowden out of town for winning 7 games a year, right? Like the guy that built the program, they said, dude, that's enough. We can't take these 7-win seasons anymore. You got to hang it up. You got to give the reins over to Jimbo. And so, yeah, I mean, Florida State fans are right there with you. Like, dude, you got to win. Like 8's got to be the floor. You play Florida, you play Clemson, you play Miami. They all recruit better than you. Those are acceptable losses. I mean, they're not in the fans' mind, but you see what I'm saying? Like you
can't be like James
better.
Franklin against Ohio State. Yeah.
Correct. But like at the same time, man, give me James Franklin against Ohio State as opposed to losing to Stanford, right? Who doesn't have a
Yeah.
coach, doesn't have anything going on. So yeah, I think that you're right. Like they still do have a ton of talent and they're somehow finding a way to bungle it game after game, season after season.
You brought up the 24/7 composite rankings, that's a great stat. I had no idea that was a thing that you could calculate. But another thing that I was looking up about Florida State, and I've really started getting into these rankings over the last few weeks because the more I'm learning about, because I'm seeing just the dumbest arguments online every single day about which team could win a hypothetical game, resume, strength of schedule. It's like no one really knows what they're talking about. And a big thing that the college football committee, playoff committee, is doing this year is that they're relying on a lot of these advanced metrics. And are they an exact science? Should we use that as our Bible? No, but they're weighing these a lot more heavily than they have in previous years. So when people ask the question, hey, why is Ohio State and Indiana 1 and 2, and why is Texas A&M 3 consistently? Even though what was it, strength of record? I think Texas A&M was gloating about that last week. It's because all these advanced metrics have Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, and then Texas A&M a lot of those times isn't even in the top 5. I bring all of that stuff up is I was looking at Florida State and all of these metrics. Florida State's still a top 30 team in most of these metrics, whether it's the SP Plus rankings, whether it's the Football Power Index. Like they're still grading out very well. Now, another team that is also like a top 20 in all these is Penn State. But the point is that there's still a lot of talent on these football teams. And even Florida State this year, they're 17th in the country in points per game. They're 30th in opponents' points per game allowed. Like it feels like if I am making the argument of Mike Norvell and bringing him back next year and trying to restore the glory of what was the 22 and 23 seasons, I would just make the case of like, hey, we have like kind of what you were saying earlier. We bring back all of these assistants. We're going to be year 2 in all of our system. We're all going to, be another year just connected and chemistry and all of that stuff. And then we go out, we're going to have a lot more coaching changes, I think, over the next few weeks as well, where we're going to see coaches leave a bunch of jobs. I think we're going to have a way deeper transfer portal quarterback pool this year. You just go and get a quarterback and, you fill some other holes in the transfer portal. And then if it doesn't work next year, then that's when you throw the bag out the window for Mike Norvell. That seems like an actually pretty decent argument because, again, all these advanced metrics do actually favor Florida State pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could. I'm a little leery of some of them because Florida State's offense is carrying that torch pretty heavily, and they've been really, really good. I'm a little hesitant to buy all of the hype with Florida State's offense after painstakingly watching this season. They put up like 1,500 yards and 150 points against East Texas A&M and Kent State. And I know a lot of it is opponent adjusted, but that still weighs pretty heavily. And then like in the Pitt game and the Virginia game and the Miami game, they were consistently having to come back. They trailed the whole time and they were having to fight back, and they made some nice plays, don't get me wrong. But for the Miami game, they had a ton of yardage and they ended up scoring a ton in the fourth quarter, but the game was over. Like it was largely uncompetitive, right? And then, I do agree with that. They've also run it up against like the Wakes and the Virginia Techs, which I don't think are very good. When they play a quality defense, like a Miami for 3 quarters, like a Clemson, they have really struggled. They've been very bad inside the red zone. The offense is very gimmicky. And so you can't run as many tricks inside of the red zone, right? Because there's just less space to operate. So, but you are right. Like at the end of the day, the advanced analytics say that they're top 30-ish. Their offense continues to be really, really good grading out. I am a little hesitant to buy that as much. I also think that the fact that they have 4 losses that are extremely close and all by 1 score helps them a ton. I think getting back really close in that Miami game helps them a lot because at the end of the day, that looks like it was a good game. Though if you watched it, you know that Florida State never really had a chance. They never had the ball down one possession. So yeah, I think some of that is a little bit misleading. But even if you say that's not misleading, like if you say like, yeah, they're a top 30 team graded out, and I think you look at the coaches and say, why are you graded ahead of all of these other teams, save Miami? Like they're graded ahead of Clemson. Why are you graded ahead of all these other teams that you lost to? And 5-5 right now, right? Like, what is it about this staff? What is it about this program? What is it about this team that just cannot find a way to win games? And so, man, either way, whether you buy it or don't buy it with the advanced metrics and stuff, they just haven't been good enough. And I think it's concerning for fans.
Yeah, I can't agree with you there. It's kind of like I'm starting to have different opinions about one score games and that statistic, because when you read a lot of these like preview stuff like all before the year, a way that people try to like predict swings of certain teams is they're like, oh, they were 5-1 in one score games, so the next year will probably average out where they're 3-3, or vice versa, they're 1-5, it'll average out. I also think too that when you are consistently one way or the other, a great example of that is Scott Frost at Nebraska, where he was like very, very low in one score games. Like it seemed like almost every game he lost in Nebraska was a one score game. It seems like there is like a deficiency there with coaching. And like what we said earlier, Florida State one score games the last few years has just been, they've lost all of them.
Atrocious.
Yeah, they've lost all of them. Go ahead.
Some of it can be a little fake. Like they were down by 14 against Pittsburgh with like a minute and a half left, and they hit a Hail Mary to make it a one-score game. And so was that a one-score game? Did it finish one-score? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Did they score a garbage time touchdown to make it look better? Of course they did, right? They were down 28-3 in the fourth quarter against Miami and scored 20 points, whatever it was to get it 17 points to get it back to a 1 point score game. They were down 8 with 30 seconds left and didn't get an onside kick. So yeah, 2 of their one-score losses, to me, if you watch the game, weren't even one-score losses. They were non-competitive with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter in the Miami game, even before that. So I do agree with you. I think that sometimes can be misleading. I mean, go look at Kirby Smart's record in one-score games. I know we're talking about the best coach in the game, right? Go look at Ryan Day's record in one-score games. Go look at go look at the elite programs in the sport. For some reason, their teams find a way to win those games. And for some reason at Florida State, they find a way to lose them.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of the stuff with Mike Norvell here and just the way this program is going. It feels like they just get destroyed these last 2 games. They might be forced to make a move just because funding in other areas might, ultimately be the case where it's like, hey, we can't afford to keep them. But right now, what are you leaning as to whether or not they're actually going to keep him or get rid of him? Like, what would you say the percentage is each way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'll give a long answer on this one too, just because I can't shut up. But I think it's all record dictated. If they lose these next 2 games, I think they're going to let him go. So if they finish at 5-7, I think he's out. I'd say 85-90%. If they go 7-5, if they win these last 2 games, I think it's probably the other way that they keep him. I think it's 75 to 80% that they keep him if they go 7-5. I have problems with that based on the opponents you play down the stretch, but that's just my vibe on what they do. 6-6 is a coin flip. I'd say 6-6. They probably end up keeping him, but it's much closer. It's like 60-40. If I had to predict the last 2 games, I think they find a way to win one. They lose the other, probably win this weekend, or this week, I guess it's a Friday night game against NC State. Then probably lose in the swamp against Florida. So if that's the case, if my record prediction ends up being right and they split these last 2 games, then I think it's probably 60-40 they keep him. If you got embarrassed in one of the 2 games, could that impact it? Sure. But man, they play a lot of close games, so I don't really see them getting embarrassed in either one of them. So I think I'd go 60-40 they keep him, because I think they go 6-6.
Beating your rival 2 or losing to your rival 2 can also dictate a lot of that stuff, which is fan morale. So even if you beat Florida, you leave the season with a good taste in your mouth. You're going to a bowl game. TJ, I got one last question for you, and then I'll get out here, and then we'll get out of here. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this. So at the beginning of last season, there is a Florida State fan account, and he tweets before the Boston College game that if Boston College beats Florida State, that he would eat dog poop out of a Solo cup with a plastic spoon. Is Florida State cursed because he did not fulfill this bet? Is that actually a more plausible explanation that Florida State is cursed than Mike Norvell just became a very bad coach?
It's definitely possible. I think the Alabama game proved that the curse was lifted. In fact, there was another fan, because our fans just can't stop making bets on the internet. There was another fan that guaranteed to get a Mike Norvell tattoo had Florida State beat Alabama, and he went and got that. So to me, that broke the curse, and it's now just back on Norvell. All the things, I know this was in jest, but all the things we've talked about, Mike Norvell not being a great recruiter, the way that they've been terrible against teams with more talent or less talent than them. I'll let the Red Solo Cup poop eater off the hook and say that I'm going to blame Norvell instead of him. But yeah, it definitely felt like it was the curse last year.
I still blame the poop guy. I did a video about that, and then every time after that Florida State lost, I just kept getting more views on it. Whatever it was, I don't know if people were searching it or if it just popped up in the algorithm, but every time Florida State lost last year, just was like 20 more views.
Yeah,
and this
awesome.
usually the lifeline of a lot of these videos is only in a few days. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Mike Norvell's fate rests in the last 2 weeks of this football season, and what they can do next year or not new next year. So anyways, that's going to do it for this episode here today. TJ, do you want to tell us where we can find all of your content, and then we'll head out of here?
Yeah, go to YouTube or stay here on YouTube if that's where you're watching it, and search Double Fries No Slaw. It will come up with a picture of a French fry and a microphone. So we talk about FSU, mostly football, but some other sports too throughout the year, and we'd love to have you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have the links to all of your stuff in the description below. Thank you guys out there so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, leave a comment. Do you want Mike Norvell to stay? What do you think was the biggest problem with Florida State under Mike Norvell, and how did we get to this situation here at the end of 2025? Would love to hear your guys' thoughts, and thank you for watching. We'll talk to you next time.